How do I know if I'm at risk for a layoff? What are the warning signs that you should look for? This is a great question. I think the worst thing with a layoff is when you're like, whoa, what just happened? You always, I think, you always want to have your bearings at work. Like, are things going well? Are things going not well? How's the company doing? Does it seem like you're making money, or does it seem like you're cutting cost all the time? So I think when you're at risk for a layoff, here's how I would walk down that path. One, you should have a sense of how's the company doing. Like when you hear your executives talk or you read any public information about your company, or you listen, if it's a public company, you listen to the earnings, you should be able to get a sense of like, are you in the red or are you in the green? If things are in the red and your company's losing money, or you're hearing things like consumers aren't buying our products, or our foot traffic is down, or our growth is less than it was last year, those are the warning signs that your company could be thinking about layoffs. Generally, when the revenue of a company goes down and the profit goes down, the biggest expense that most companies have is headcount. So obviously that's when the layoffs kind of enter the chat. So the first is pay attention to what's happening at your company. The second is think about if your group is fat or not. Everybody knows if their group is fat or not. If your group is fat, it means that you have multiple people who do the same job. You can leave work at 4 o'clock every day and nobody notices. There's no stress of too much work happening. You're basically like mailing it in or coasting, or you're not very challenged, or you don't feel stressed. Not that stress means that your group is going well. There could be a whole host of other issues there. But in general, if your group is kind of bloated, your group is probably ripe for a layoff. The third is, do you work in a part of the company that makes money or not? The last people to get laid off, in my experience, are the people that make money. When you're seeing warning signs in your company, you also got to pay attention to where you work. Are you a cost to the company, or are you a revenue driver for the company? I was always really paranoid about this, and I always wanted to be on the revenue side of things, just so that if there were a layoff, that I wouldn't be affected. I was laid off once, and it was really kind of it was a upsetting experience, and I was like, ooh, I never want to be laid off again. Now, employees don't control when they get laid off or not. I certainly don't control that in my life, but if you can find yourself on the make money side of the equation, you're probably in the best possible position to not get laid off. But if you heed the warning signs, then you can get ahead of it. So if you're seeing that your company isn't doing great, if you're noticing that your group is kind of bloated, if you recognize that you're on the non-money making side of the house, it's a good idea to get your resume together and to get ahead of it. One of the things that's happening in New York right now is that all of the major media companies are laying off people, right? CNN's laying off people, Bleacher Report's laying off people, Discovery's laying off people, mostly CNN people and Warner people. If you are a salesperson or an account manager right now looking for a job, it sucks because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of those types of people in New York City looking for work right now. Same with Twitter people. You want to get ahead of the layoff. You want to be able to get out there, put your resume out there before there's 30 other people like you doing the same exact thing. So that's my 2 cents there. All right, second question. After losing your job, what are the things to focus on in your next job search? Look, having been laid off, I think losing your job sucks. You want to give yourself like 24, 48, 72 hours to like lick your wounds. You're going to lie in bed. You might call your mom or your dad. You're going to feel badly about yourself. Maybe you eat like too many cheeseburgers or drink too many drinks, or you go out and stupidly get drunk in the afternoon with your friends because you can. Give yourself that window to just feel like shit. I think it's an important moment. Obviously, there's a lot to worry about. You got to worry about your bills. You got to worry about when rent is due, or your college loans, or how you're going to pay for your car, like your credit card debt. Like, you got to worry about all that stuff. But give yourself a moment to feel sad and to process all those feelings, or at least recognize that you're having those feelings. I think then the next thing is getting laid off from a job is not the worst thing ever. It's an opening. It's maybe a door that you didn't open yourself, but somebody else opened for you, and you have the chance to walk through it. So in this case, figure out where you want to go. Do you want to turn left down the street, or do you want to turn right down the street? And I think the right way to do that is to think about, what did you love in your job? Like, what did you absolutely love to do in this last job? What was your favorite part about it? What were you really good at? What did you enjoy learning about? What was your greatest contribution? And then when you think about what your next job is, make sure that the next job or the jobs you pursue have those things as part of that job description. This is a huge opportunity for you to think about a new company, a new city, a new type of role, a new type of company, a new sector, a new industry. Like, it's a great, amazing opportunity to think about doing something different, maybe to make a crazy left turn in your career or take a totally different path. But in order to do that, one is take the moment to be sad and feel like shit so it doesn't kind of linger with you. And then second, with a clear head, figure out what you like to do and go about aggressively pursuing a job that has those attributes to it. What should you do when all companies in your industry are in a hiring freeze? Okay, heads up, most companies are going to be in hiring freezes. Like, the economy's hitting the skids, inflation is through the roof, the government is having a hard time bringing it down, there's supply chain issues, there's unrest in the world, the climate's on fire. Like, it is doom and gloom out there. Also, I saw this on Barstool Sports. If the Phillies win, every time the Philly wins a World Series, we go into a recession. So, start rooting for the Astros might be my first biggest piece of advice there. So the biggest thing is a lot of companies are going to go into hiring freezes. I'm thinking about this right now for Barstool, where we're on fire. We're growing faster than everybody else in our sector. We're doing so profitably. Like, we have a good thing going on. But as a manager and as a CEO, it's easier to not hire people than to lay people off. And I don't ever want to be in a position, or I want to avoid as much as possible being in a position to lay people off. So the best way to do that is to slow down or freeze the hiring. If you're in an industry, let's say take the media industry, most companies are definitely in a hiring slowdown, possibly in a total hiring freeze. If companies are in a hiring freeze in your industry, it means it's going to be hard to bop around and interview for and get a new job. So the best thing you can do is to hunker down and make the most of the job you have now. It's kind of a funny thing, I think, for people, because the Great Recession was happening where everybody could get a job everywhere, and there was thousands, people felt like they had thousands of offers, or people felt that they had hundreds of offers or dozens of offers, and everything was bright and there was great mobility, and you could jump from this job to this job to this job and get a pay raise every time. That's not going to be the case for 2023, maybe 2024, maybe 2025. So, my advice would be the best thing you can do is to make the most of your job that you have now. Make sure you have job security in the job that you have now. Build that resume. And then when the world starts to open up, then get out there early to go find what that next gig is. So, all right, last question for us is, if you are laid off, how do you explain that in your cover? How do you explain that in your cover letter or on your resume? Look, I don't think you need to say that you were laid off on your cover letter. I really don't. I don't think you need to put it on your resume. You worked from your company from this date to this date. And now you're looking for a new opportunity. Now, if you are traveling in a small circle or you're in a smaller industry, it's probably fairly obvious, especially if there's been a big layoff, that you were part of a layoff. At which point, if somebody asks you hey, why did you leave your company? Why'd you leave Barstool Sports? Why'd you leave Warner Media? Why'd you leave CNN? I think it's totally acceptable to say, hey, I was part of a restructuring. The company, was cutting this much cost every quarter. My group was heavily affected. As a result, I'm starting to look at all sorts of new opportunities. Because you were laid off, it doesn't mean you weren't great at your job. And because you were laid off, it doesn't mean that your group was viable or smart or needed or necessary or high functioning at the company. If you take CNN, for example, I think this quarter I heard they're trying to take, I think we talked about this, $75 million out of the P&L. And next quarter, they're going to take $250 million out of the P&L. When you have to cut $250 million out of your P&L, there's a lot of jobs that are going to be lost. Those loss of jobs have nothing to do with an individual person's performance. It has to do with the company taking a massive amount of cost off the table. So my recommendation would be like, don't hide from it. You don't need to advertise it. It's not, who you are isn't, you're not wearing like, I was laid off on your t-shirt, although that might be a funny t-shirt to make. Like, don't advertise it, don't lead with it, but don't hide from it either. Hey, I'm looking for a new job. I worked at this company. They had a massive restructuring and a layoff. I was part of that. It gave me the opportunity to rethink what I want to be doing, and I'm really excited about pursuing this. That's kind of how I would tackle it.